We are the wind in the sails of your business. We are your compass. Chart your course towards your targets. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.
Africa is rising, they say. But Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people? Through social change and development. Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1. Hello and welcome to another episode of Social Conscience with NASA FCDO, right here at the Africa Business Radio Studio in Lagos, Nigeria. I am your host with the most, NASA. So, 2020 is finally beginning to wind down. It's the last month of the last quarter, and the heavy sighs of relief are almost audible for me. Even though we are not totally out of the woods yet, there's still some optimism about the new year ushering in better luck. Your families, businesses, governments, all have been hit by the pandemic. Thankfully, the projections for the impact of the pandemic on Africa have not been as dire as expected. Nonetheless, it has created some major setbacks. Thank you again for staying with me in November when we discussed entrepreneurship in Africa. It was great to hear diverse views from different parts of the continent. If you missed any of those conversations, you can catch the podcast versions by visiting www.africabusinessradio.com or download the app or download the podcast from any of the popular podcast platforms. So still on actualizing the African dream of greatness, this month on STWN, we will be discussing trade in Africa, especially in view of the soon-to-be implemented Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement in 2021. So in 2012, a decision was made by to establish the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AFCFTA. It's a mouthful. And this decision was taken by all heads of state and government of the African Union. The AFTA is the first step in the implementation of the AU Agenda 2063 with the vision for an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa. With all that's happened, opening up our borders as the continent may be the game changer we need post-COVID. That said, with all the great benefits articulated on paper, I'm interested to know how realistic these expectations are and when we can actually begin to see some of those benefits. I have an international trade expert joining me in conversation to share his views tonight on the topic based on his vast wealth of experience in this area. But before I introduce my guest, please stay right here while we go on a quick break.
We are the wind in the sails of your business. We are your compass. Chart your course towards your targets. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.
You're listening to Africa Business Radio, where you get up-to-date insights on the Africa business landscape. Log on to www.africabusinessradio.com. Your favorite shows are available on podcasts. Download them on our website and mobile app. Africa Business Radio, towards a profitable Africa.
Welcome back. And if you're just tuning in, it's Social Conscience with NASA on Africa Business Radio. And the topic for today, if you're listening earlier, is on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And we're talking losing borders and integrating for greatness. So according to the World Bank, the African Continental Free Trade Area presents a major opportunity for African countries to bring 30 million people out of extreme poverty and to raise the incomes of 68 million others who live on less than $5.50 per day. West Africa would see the biggest decline in the number of people living in extreme poverty, a decline of about 12 million, more than a third of the total for all of Africa. According to the Global Director of Trade, Investment and Competitiveness at the World Bank, Caroline Freund, she says creating a single continent-wide market for goods and services, business and investment would reshape African economies. The implementation of AfCFTA would be a huge step forward for Africa, demonstrating to the world that it is emerging as a leader on the global trade agenda. As mentioned, to share his views on how losing our borders and creating a large trade area will deliver the great Africa we all wish to see, I will introduce my guest for today. And my guest is Simeon Umukoro, who is an international trade expert, an economist, and a member of the World Economic Association, United Kingdom. His 17 years of professional experience spans 2 Forbes 500 companies, developing and facilitating international trade in West Africa, the United Kingdom with the Department for International Trade of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, FCDO, and the Trade, Investment and Innovation Unit of United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. He provided technical capacity building in standards development, technical regulations, WTO trade notification management process for the World Trade Organization National Notification Authority in Nigeria, a feat to enhance facilitation of trade in goods and services in Nigeria. Simeon spearheaded the study of Nigeria's technical regulations regime and also managed the development of an integrated export quality control plan aimed at improving traceability and enhancing the quality of produce in the agri-business value chain in Nigeria for the enhancement of exports. To my listeners, please feel free to weigh in by sending your questions or comments to @AfricaBizRadio, that's Africa BIZ Radio, one word, on Twitter with the hashtag SCWN. Welcome to the show, Simeon, and, very impressive profile you have there, I dare say. Thank you for accepting to share your knowledge and views on the show. So how are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much, Inasa, for having me on your show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
You. Go ahead, Simeon.
Yeah, an interesting conversation here. CFTA, basically, and it's the first of its kind, being that this is the first time Africa is intentionally, very intentional, coming together to discuss not aid, but trade.
Interesting.
Trade to enhance the condition of citizens within the continent. And why it's very interesting is because this conversation is done on our own terms, with respect to what we want, specifically for us and by us. It's intra-Africa.
For Africans and by Africans.
Exactly. And you can also tell the big potential it has, being that we do know intra-African trade is less than 16% of what Africa trades globally.
Wow.
You can imagine what enormity in size we're talking about here.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction to the topic. So I know you were listening earlier, and what the topic for discussion today is about losing borders and creating greatness. And it's just basically off the back of that context, from the excerpt I read from the World Bank report, referring to how this is a game changer for Africa by all the countries coming together to create this huge market. And I have a number of questions here. I wanted to start with, so we talk about all these benefits, but I just have a real concern. How realistic are these? We always have good policies and good plans on paper. And I'm just a bit concerned that would this be one of those beautiful agendas that just never really materialize? So how realistic are these expectations of the benefits we're supposed to get from the free trade area, given the situation of things and how Africa is?
Okay. In all sense of things like this,
yes,
there's always a downside.
Of course.
But for this particular case, things are quite optimistic about how it will unfold. Mm-hmm. The reason being that it's the first of its kind, with the volume of countries that have actually deliberately decided to put behind this the force that it needs to take off. So, for example, we already have 34 countries so far that have ratified.
Right.
Of the over 50 countries that we have in Africa, we have 41 tariffs already as we speak that have been provided as offers, submitted already. And this is to show the sheer willingness to make this work. And I think also for the first time, it's behoved to most African leaders that the terms of trade that they have struggled with in the past can actually be palliated with this kind of conversation,
right,
without them feeling like their countries will be left out of in the cold.
Right.
Most trade protocols were actually decided before Africans even became members of the WTO.
Right.
Most of it.
Right.
However, and as we speak, because that's the situation, most of the realities of African countries were not particularly factored into these trade protocols.
Right.
So it's realistic to see Africans struggle to do global trade. However, this becomes something that's indicative of what we can try out on our own and see what happens. Although the conversation out there is that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement was developed on the premise of the provisions of the WTO trade protocols. Yes, it follows through with the WTO trade protocols on goods, on services, on intellectual properties, just everything replicated by the WTO protocol, what we have, right?
So how is that ours then? That's not original, is it?
Well, you might say it's not original, but it's built on something that exists.
That exists and works, right?
It is not built on nothing. Exactly. So it's working, and which is the basis for building the CFTA on it. However, the CFTA twists, because it's a regional trade agreement.
Yes.
We are at that flexibility to tweak how we carry out the agreement and operationalize it to the realities of our own countries and the frontiers that we produce in. Okay. So basically, it's a good try to start first, and like I said, it's the first of its kind.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So speaking of, global trade, existing global trade principles, as it were, I was going to ask, and this was a question that I was like, so if we have this, what's the implication for existing trading relationships? So does that mean that everybody's just going to be focused on this and then they ignore whatever else exists, because then we can get everything we want within our region?
Well, let's look at the principle the WTO operates by.
Okay.
Whilst you are party to a particular trade agreement, the WTO does not stop you from getting into another one, provided that the new one does not go less than it does not create more barriers than the previous ones you have.
Okay.
So basically, the CFTA aligns with that principle, which is what? It increases trade liberalization across the continent.
Okay.
It is a better arrangement, a better terms of trade that opens up further than any African country or region is presently operating by.
Right.
So you do not see anything wrong necessarily with that principle, which is being replicated here. That's one. Two, the CFTA by itself is also hinged on the principle of working with the regional trade regional trade bodies existing within the continent. It does not play blind to it.
Right.
And it's deliberate. It's there in one of the principles.
Okay. So all that's protected.
Yeah.
Okay. So some questions I have. So we know that the trade agreement, so the free trade area, is expected to provide business opportunities that will enhance industrialization in Africa. And these are one of the benefits that have been highlighted. What are your views on this?
Okay, the term industrialization, we oftentimes get it abused or sometimes misunderstood.
Okay, tell me, what's industrialization?
And the plan by most African countries to become industrialized is what leads to protectionism.
Okay.
In how they open up to trade. They tell you we want to protect our
indigenous
local industries. We don't want them to be, Now, that fear of not being able to compete with others because the standards or the advancement is so far from what we presently operate in is usually the reason behind protectionism.
Right.
With the CFTA, it's like apple compared to apples.
Okay.
Even if we do have a situation where a country in Africa is far more advanced, like most people think about Nigeria in terms of production capacity.
Yes.
It will not be so far-fetched like the gap you have existing between African countries or the advanced countries in the Americas or in Europe.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of openness taking place here. And indeed, that industrialization, as expected, would naturally have its space to grow because industrialization is simply given the time and having the opportunity to practice and fail and practice and fail until you perfect and master this process. We can see that in the history of the Asian tigers.
Okay. Interesting. So when you say, the word is abuse industrialization, so then what is industrialization to you?
Well, industrialization is just being able to produce what you consume, right? Having the capacity deployed to improve on your production frontier at different times. Being able to have the wherewithal in terms of scientific advancement, in terms of capacity of your citizenry, in terms of industrial capacity, and even investment to pursue such ambition together. Yeah. And these are the missing links. And like I said, it's a synergy. These things work together. And this is what industrialization is about, basically.
Right.
However, African countries have not allowed for this to be because of the fear of being outshined or put aside. Or they're losing their market. So and they don't want that to happen.
So what has changed? Because that's exactly what this free trade area is going to do.
What has changed is this. First off, we are competing against each other within the continent.
Okay.
The advancement that we presently... We already, as we speak, there are organic trade relationships going on within the continent.
Right.
By itself. 1, 2. Yeah, exactly. Ongoing. Now, outside this, the basic challenge of being consumed by another market because of their industrialized power is not as heightened as it were when compared to countries outside the continent. So we are likely to have a little bit of openness taking place, and you can tell from the records of things how things are unfolding. For you to have 34 countries ratifying. It's a quick time ratification, enough for it to even start operationalization in January 1st.
Yeah.
It's the fast. It's one of the fastest in terms of trade agreements, regional trade agreements being ratified by member countries.
Okay, so you're a trade expert, and just looking at other free trade agreements that have been successful.
So you want me to just give you more? So,
no. So I wanted to ask about other free trade agreements, right? So if you look at what's it's a mouthful, AFTA is set to do, would you say that we're on the right path? And so looking at NAFTA, for instance, one of the questions I had was around, the promises of job creation. And then if you look at some of the criticisms of the NAFTA, it was that it actually created more unemployment in America. So should we accept this sort of challenge because we're looking for it to create jobs, all those beautiful things, and alleviate poverty? But do you think that this has been set in the appropriate way that maybe sort of addresses whatever challenges NAFTA had and precluded those benefits?
Well, with respect to NAFTA, right, when you check the entities involved, we had a situation where an advanced economy having to collaborate in an agreement with another economy that is not necessarily as advanced or even half as advanced.
Okay.
And that fear of being consumed by the sheer market size or the power of the industrialization there was so in the air on that particular agreement.
Gotcha.
And these are not attributes that you can attach to this AFCFTA.
Okay.
It doesn't exist. If you want to talk about economies that are very advanced with respect to in comparison to other African countries, maybe South
Africa is what comes to mind, actually.
But South Africa is just one of the 54 something countries you have. And the question is, how much of the market do they have control over?
Okay.
Across the continent.
Okay.
Exactly. So I don't think it's not a great comparison to look at both and worry about what went down with that one that might actually affect the AFCFTA by itself.
Okay, great. Okay, so coming back to Nigeria, and you and I had a conversation earlier, and it's basically how would a small business in Nigeria, looking at the launch of the AFCTA in January, how do I want to prepare myself to harness the opportunities within the agreement?
Okay. So for small businesses, the first approach for small businesses should be, of course, identifying opportunities, which is just find out where the money is, right? Yeah. Then decide to go for the money. But how do we go for the money? Do we go for the money in the usual business as usual approach?
Okay.
I would say maybe not. Why? It's better to aggregate. It's better to cluster.
Okay.
When you cluster as businesses, you can affect how the market takes your products or your services.
Okay.
And this is calling for clear market coordination amongst the organized private sector.
Right.
And the not organized private sector player, because there are some private sector players that are not in any organized body.
That's right.
It is now needed for all private sector operators to organize, cluster, and aggregate how they approach going forward, taking whatever markets of interest they have within the continent. One thing that we have going for us as Nigeria is clearly the fact that we do have penetration in the market.
Correct.
If you go across the West African market, Nigerian products exist in all the markets. In all the markets that have been within the West African zone, there is a Nigerian product there.
Gotcha.
And the question is, how did it get there? It got there through very organic channels that grew over the years. And these organic channels are not replicable easily. Okay. So if you do have any other country looking to take or compete with Nigeria, it will take a while for them to organically build such channels as well. However, for the small business that is gradually operating within local markets and looking to just move from the domestic market to the continental market, the best way to do it is to go together.
Right.
By clustering, by organizing, and by aggregating.
And by clustering, are you talking about businesses with similar products or services, or just, a group of businesses with shared goals as opposed to products? Definitely, it should be businesses with market interest, similar market interest. Okay. Not necessarily products that are similar. So if I do have a market interest and the value chain process requires that my product, which is not similar to yours, should be in the pursuit for that market, then we should come together to collaborate as a cluster to attend to the value chain needs or gaps that we want to take advantage of. So it's not as per product, it's as per market. Okay, that's actually very interesting. Market interest. Yeah, well, fantastic. So, like I said, I think that all of this still sounds very far, and, it's been this plan that's been ongoing, and we see, I'm not sure how... that. So, I was saying that, I don't even know that small businesses understand or are aware of what they need to do, and how I'm just also interested to know how this awareness is being pushed in terms of what they need to start doing and what they need to start thinking, so that it doesn't come and then everybody's trying to figure out how to react and how best to make it work. So who would be responsible for promoting that awareness in Nigeria to make sure that... It's a two-way street. First off, of course, it's in the news. Government has gone to ratify. Government has gone into an agreement. Yes. But guess what? Government does not trade.
Government does not trade. It's businesses that trade. Countries don't trade.
That's
It's
right.
the businesses in those countries that trade.
Correct.
So if businesses do not exist in countries, no country will be trading with the other because there are no businesses to do such.
Yeah.
So now that government has gone to engage and sign up access to a larger market than what we have with ourselves, it is now up to businesses, chambers of commerce, trade associations to now come together, working deliberately and intentionally with government,
Right.
to use the same government's opening to further help get into those regions that we're talking about.
Right.
Now, so for example, what are we talking about here? If we speak to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, speak to a NASIMA, speak to a NASMI, question is, how much business matching is NASMI, NASIMA, and Manufacturers Association of Nigeria? How much business matching are they doing now?
Yeah.
Within the continent in preparation for January 1st?
Exactly.
How much business equivalent matches are they doing with respect to trading across and getting mutual recognition of what wares and products and services are going to be traded across these borders? These are the kind of conversations they should be initiating.
Yes. But that's not
happening.
happening.
It's in the initiation of such exactly. And it's in the initiation of such discussions they would have the base to come back home to say, you know what, we've been able to establish what we can fairly trade across borders along the lines of this equivalence that we mutually agree.
Yeah. We
want you to help us do what? Domesticate it in our laws, just like they are going to be domesticating it in their laws. And we want it to be something our own law recognize here.
Yes.
So that we are honoring what we have committed to do as businesses.
So Simeon, that sounds to me like, so is this, I mean, this is starting, 1st of January, and we're still talking about what different bodies and associations should be doing that they're not doing already. So what's going to happen come January 1?
The last line is what I not necessarily want us to assume that businesses are not doing.
Okay.
We do not have that fact.
Sure.
At least I've sat in meetings where strategies were discussed, and within the line of our expertise, I provided what I think should be done. They've taken it as advisory.
Okay.
And in the presidency, they're also doing quite a number of conversations around this and helping to see how they can provide leadership. Right?
Okay.
But not drive the process, because they're engaging private sector operators within the Chamber of Commerces, within trade associations to do the driving.
Okay.
So we cannot
categorically
say nothing is being done. Some things are happening. We might not have them out there.
Right. Okay.
The question is how efficient, how ready are we for January 1st? Do we have a product to sell yet? Do we have a business matching process established already?
Yeah.
Do we have a business equivalent or mutual agreement established already? Do we have an idea of the kind of market we're looking to even engage?
Okay.
To transact with?
Those are the questions. Fair enough. Speaking about readiness, right? So the African markets, we're wondering if the African markets are actually prepared for this heightened level of competition. So our continent remains plagued by, a lot of challenges, right? Poor infrastructure, policies that are not very supportive, and legal frameworks, transportation networks, all sorts, government bureaucracy, etc., and corruption. So when we talk about readiness, apart from all the necessary tools to operationalize this, our environment, the political landscape, everything, the business landscape, how does it position us for actually kicking this off? Or it doesn't matter?
Okay, it does matter. It does matter. That's the truth. It does.
Okay.
But sometimes when this conversation come on, it usually impresses one on like the chicken and egg conversation. Which one should come? Which one should come first? But what I've come to realize is this: the idea of infrastructure being put together in readiness for trade is good. But we've seen in the past that oftentimes such social investment on infrastructural needs in anticipation of trade is usually, at best, does not match the trade requirement at that time.
Okay.
So you would want to seek for perhaps a change in strategy. Instead of us anticipating and expecting and hoping to put these infrastructures in readiness, how about putting up a strategy that identifies the market, the opportunity, and then deploy resources to enhance and make it happen? And which is actually what you see out there with respect to resource deployment in the advanced climes. You don't just come in telling us that infrastructure spending should go in this direction because we anticipate. No, you have to show the money. Is there an opportunity there? The potential of growth, is it there? Show us those that have been trying to do it, so that whilst we put the money to support the infrastructural needs, we can begin to see that growth take place. And not necessarily have everything go moribund like we've had in the past. And I think the CFTA leaves us in that direction because we're not traveling to any other continent. We're still within the continent, like agreeing to trade or have conversations with my neighbor. And we've decided by January, this conversation will start with different things. I'll bring out my food, you bring out your plate. You have the cutlery. You bring in what you have. Based on what we see, the potential of that exchange that is where we'll then put our money as countries. And I think this is a good approach to seeing to what we need to do to establish trade across countries within the continent.
Okay, interesting view. And I think I sort of agree with you. So we can't wait for everything to be perfect before we start. And maybe this, in fact, what will force certain things to then be put in place, as opposed to trying to just waiting and creating infrastructure that will add value to the kind of trading activities that we expect to see. Okay, so I wanted to ask about the size. And I think I mentioned it at the beginning. There are a lot of countries, and the AFCTA has been described as the largest trade agreement or trade area, just based on number of countries. And I wonder about that as well. So a lot of countries coming together, does that pose more challenges than benefits, just in terms of coordination and, dissenting views and approaches? Neither here nor there.
Indeed, it's both here and there. The challenges are more.
Right.
Indeed, because of the sheer size and the fact that you need to move everyone in the same direction. And indeed, it is also a large set of opportunity that never existed for the continent. Let me give you a typical example. As we speak, it is cheaper to buy things that you can actually get down south if you're operating from a West African country. It's cheaper to get things from Asia or even Europe to West Africa than it is for you to go down East Africa, do the same transaction.
That's interesting.
Yes. And this is because what we presently have is Africa has trade relationships that have grown over time and have become eased out with the improved nature and interaction of the businesses and the trading exchanges with other continents. We've not been able to do that mastery within ourselves. The moment we're able to do this mastery within ourselves, I would not need to go out there for what I know I can get down here at a shorter distance with people that might likely just understand my language easily and possibly at a cheaper overhead cost. And like I said, this is a reality that didn't exist before now. And it's an opportunity that it's something we, even the proponents of the CFTA still do not have an idea of how big
this is,
the potential this move is. And I'm telling you, those in our lifetime do not have no one in our lifetime.
Has an idea.
I don't know if there's an amongst us. No one in our lifetime has the full understanding
Okay.
of the potential that this brings to the continent. We don't.
Simeon, it sounds to me like it's one of those things that, you know what, it's either it goes really well and it'll be fantastic, or if it fails, it would be an epic failure. Would you agree?
No, I won't.
Tell me why not.
It wouldn't. It might not go as well
Okay.
as hoped for or as wished for, but it won't be an epic failure in that sense.
Okay. Why did you say
It
so?
won't. Why I say so is because trade will always take place
Okay.
within the continent.
Right.
It might not remain at 14% or 16%,
Okay.
depending on which of the data you're choosing to work with.
Yeah.
It will increase.
Okay.
It will definitely increase. And something about trade is just like water finding its level.
Right.
Trade can't be, you can't constrict it. Why? The buyer would always go seeking for the seller.
That's right.
Now, the moment there is a streak of possibility or potential of trading across Africa, and it's meeting with the demand of whatever region chooses to trade,
Yeah.
I tell you, it will
That'd be good.
expand and open even more. It will not go moribund. So I don't see it going like
An epic
people are
failure.
thinking, like
Okay.
it's going to be an epic. No.
Okay,
I don't see that
that's
happening.
comforting to hear, and I do hear you actually. The truth is, you know, even if it doesn't go as expected, the worst that would happen will still be useful and valuable. And speaking about existing relationships that African countries have with other trading countries or other countries, quality is a big factor. And so the reason that I will buy goods from Japan, China, etc., is because of the quality. Do you think that we're going to be at the point where we can also have that kind of comfort in the kind of goods that we get from other African countries? Because already there's just that belief that, you know, if it's made, for instance, in Nigeria, then it's probably not as good quality as the ones made, you know, in the developed world. So how are we going to address that narrative or perception?
The strange conversation around this is the fact that the pool of people demanding for quality are drawn from the same pool of people churning out poor quality. So the same people demanding for quality that are producing yes, it's the same people. It's strange, you know. But this is the point. When it comes to quality infrastructure, which is what you need to deploy to help ensure products are churned out at some minimum standard. In a consistent manner.
Okay.
Right? Africa has been challenged as well. And I say so because like I started out with the WTO trade protocols.
Yeah.
Most of these protocols were not taken and agreed upon with African countries seated at the table. So quite a number of the requirements or the expertise needed to help ensure that quality infrastructure runs across in our respective countries to help ensure products are turned out properly does not exist. So what we'll be doing now within the CFTA is Africa can now come up with its own approach to production in terms of requirements to meet with standards. And gradually improve on it to ensure that its market is satisfied to that extent that the market demands of such quality. What we have now is the fact that we are unable to produce for export in any ways because we are trying to adhere or align with trade protocols across the continent for a market that is far more advanced than ours, that has infrastructural deployed capacity that we cannot meet in the shortest term. So the coming together of Africans and trade players, so to say, would help reduce the cost of, and the time as well, of reaching that level where we can be able to say we have infrastructure that supports the production of quality products and services. Now, this conversation is honestly for another day.
Right.
If it's something you're interested in. We can deepen this conversation even more so that we understand the technicalities behind every economy that you see there that churns out quality in their markets, both for domestic use and export quality. Yeah.
So, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I know that one of the challenges from MSME survey that was done, and in terms of small businesses and their ability to export their products, is they're usually unable to meet those standards, the export standards from the developed countries. So they're unable to actually sell their products to the international markets because they don't meet those standards. And with this free trade agreement for Africa, would you then say that because of our infrastructure deficiency, would we need to lower somewhat our standards to allow for easier trading of our products? Or do you think we would have to also create as the standards as high as the ones in the developed countries? Do you see what I mean? Just so that we're able to meet the demand.
Okay. I know some people have been asking this question. Does it mean we lower our standards? I usually would respond to this using the case of China.
Okay.
So that we understand global trade as it is.
Okay.
It's not about standards lowering. It's about meeting market requirements, because it's the market that determines what is produced.
That's true.
Nobody goes producing anything under the guise of inspiration. It's the market that tells what is needed, then you go into production.
Right.
Now, China produces in a tier of quality. I think they have up to 4 tier of quality that they churn out globally.
Yeah.
And it's designed intentionally like that to meet with what the global market is.
Gotcha.
There's an African market, which is quite different from the European market.
Yes.
Which is not the same thing with the American market. And it's completely different from the China domestic market.
Right.
So China has shown us the way to relate to these things. What you might consider as low quality to another consumer might just be
the highest quality.
Sufficient quality.
Correct.
The point is there a market? And if there's a market, then we'll produce at the market requirement. Now, and this is the confusion we've had with our exports potential within the continent. We have always looked at exporting to other countries using our understanding of quality and the standards.
Right.
However, what you're supposed to be doing as a business person is
understanding
the quality and requirements of the destination market is what determines what you produce in. If I want to go to Europe, then I need to plan my production process such that it meets what Europe is looking at, because that's the market I'm interested in. So African market, question is African market requirement the same thing with the European market? I'm afraid not.
Fair enough.
It's not the same.
That's true. I mean, you're right. You tell no lie, because even as you talk about, China and this tiered and, the Chinese tiering, and I heard people say, you go to those suppliers and they'll ask you which one do you want, and then you can pick the grade, and it's usually also it's tied to price. It's price sensitive. So it's like, if you want to pay for this kind of quality, that it's up to you. Yeah. So I imagine that in truth, we may not have to lower our standards, because maybe the barest minimum, if you like, is just fine, works for us, as it already does with existing trade partners. Okay, so in terms of institutional arrangements, what would you say we need for the effective implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in Nigeria?
For institutional arrangement, first off, when you go into trade agreements,
yes,
you usually want to sit down to understand how you tweak your regulatory provision such that it protects your market.
Okay.
Because we all go there to sign up openness,
right,
but we do not intend to kill ourselves
and sell our countries.
Now, when countries do that, you would in trade terms you would call that trade remedy measures.
Okay.
Now, the first thing we should establish, now that we've signed up to opening up to the continent, is come up with our trade remedies. I know there's a plan in place to have a trade remedies office. Now, what's the role of that trade remedies office? The trade remedies office is just there to help use data to protect the local market from being outpriced in an unfair manner or done any anti-competitive activity or measure taken by any other country within the agreement. That in such a way that it affects the ability of the Nigerian domestic markets to trade. And these are principles even the WTO promotes. You do not come in to kill. You want everyone to be happy and continue to trade. Now, this is the first thing, and indeed one of the greatest priority that Nigeria should begin to deploy with respect to institutional organization or establishments to help with the operationalization of the CFTA. However, the Trade Remedies Office is completely useless if it does not have engagements deployed to it or demanded of it by the trade associations. Because the WTO's provision to how countries protect their domestic market is it's the country's state representation that goes to present a case against another country. It's not the businesses. Right. However, the case against another country is based on the business or the sector or industry players' complaint, well documented with data and facts to show that is documented and provided as complaint. Right. Now, if the Trade Remedies Office exists today and our trade associations are not working with the Trade Remedies Office to help identify what is impugning on their ability to produce and compete, or they are not providing information enough with facts to show that there is an anti-competitive element coming into our borders or our shores under the guise of the CFTA agreement,
then they can't do anything.
Office will not do anything.
That's correct.
So these two things must happen. The Trade Remedies Office
and the trade associations.
Now coordinate the trade associations to help know and develop the mastery of trade notifications.
Right. Okay.
This is the first call.
Okay.
There's so many other steps if you want to hear that.
Yes, I'd like to hear that. But before I go on that, I was just going to ask, just bringing it back to what everybody may be thinking. So if I have an opportunity to sell to a wider market and get better returns as a business owner, how does that impact local supply, GC? So I know that I can sell my goods to someone in Ghana for more money. Do you understand? So the local people, doesn't that just sort of automatically make things more expensive? Because, if you don't buy, there are people that are ready to buy my product. So just put it in layman terms.
Okay, we'll put it in layman terms, but this is the economics of trade.
Okay.
If I find export market on the ease of trading across borders provided by the agreement, and I choose to ignore my domestic market,
Yes.
to go and earn more from the Ghanaian market.
Yeah.
It's one of two things that will happen. It's either the Nigerian market increases its payment for my service so that I can issue to them, which means as a producer, I tend to earn more. I tend to earn premium because my product is having increased demand. Or someone else who might just observe the investment opportunity that this gap is creating can begin to do what? Produce to attend to the local market. Or even there's a third option. I, the producer that saw the foreign opportunity across border, and I'm aware of the domestic need and I'm ignoring it, could go into partnership or acquisition with a potential producer that can help me service my local market.
Right.
So that I can focus on the foreign market. And with all this, it's positive growth.
There are a lot of possibilities.
With all this, it's positive growth.
Yeah.
There are no negative vibes coming from it.
Okay. So we should just be really excited about it. I mean, I think it sounds like it's all positives, no matter how you try to look at it. Even the seeming negative has some positives to it. And so we should all be looking forward to the launch of the free trade agreement. So another question. So we just have a couple more minutes. We have about 5 minutes left to the end of the show, and time flies so quickly. Can you believe that? I'll ask one last question before I then ask you to share with the audience what you'd like them to know. So do you believe that the agreement will foster the ease of doing business in a country like Nigeria?
It will foster. With all the things we've been sharing before now, you can tell things will only look up and not down.
Right.
But it's also demanding of us to, as a people, be it public sector or private sector, to shape up. Because you can't go to... It's like opening up yourself for competition. I don't want to use the word war, but that is what it is.
Okay.
We always prance around with the size of our market, that we are the largest market. We are, but we're also the largest,
Let's not say what it is.
I don't want to use that word on air.
Yes.
But this is the truth. Right? Now, from the public sector side, we now need to focus on enabling businesses.
Okay.
Not going into business for helping to ensure that these things are run. No, not even if you choose to go into state-owned enterprises just to keep the business afloat.
Yeah.
Let it be that the state-owned enterprises are only providing social services that shouldn't be a commodity or commercialized in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? Let that be what government invests in as businesses to support for that further enablement of businesses.
Okay.
That's on the private sector side.
Yes.
We also need to do something on the private sector side, which is what? All our economic operators now need to work in an integrated manner that supports our intent to compete within the continent.
Okay.
Regulatory harmonization.
Very true.
Everything that has to do with SPS, TBT, that's sanitary and phytosanitary issues.
I was going to ask.
And technical barriers to trade.
Yeah.
All the economic operators that we have operating here as regulators must have a common approach that sinks into how we want to compete and strategize to win markets across the continent. There's nothing wrong in having 10 more billionaire acquisition companies that goes across the continent. I don't want to start advertising for any organization, but there's nothing wrong in having multiple Nigerian companies doing that.
That's true. That's true.
So if we do have our regulatory bodies and economic players coming together to promote and help build more Nigerian-owned companies to begin to go into the continent to acquire, to take charge of markets and take market shares, we will only be better for it.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Simeon. Unfortunately, it's almost 2 minutes to the end of the show, and I wish we had more time. I know, time flies, so we will definitely have it back on the show. There's some bits that you talked about that we obviously need to deep diver into. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a very insightful and exciting conversation. And at this juncture, I would like to thank my audience for listening. So, as you know, the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement promises a lot of great things for Africa. And if it's executed effectively, we all just need to understand what it means for us and how to harness the opportunities therein. As Simeon has said, for small businesses, the goal is to organize, cluster, and aggregate. And I totally agree with him. So, it's still trade next week when you join me on this on the conversation next week Friday. Please tune in, same time, same station as we continue these conversations. I remain yours conscientiously. Africa is rising, they say, but Africa must rise with its people. There is no Africa without its people. How then do we harness Africa's wealthy people through social change and development? Social Conscience with NASA commits to Aspiration 6 of the Africa Agenda 2063 and the Global Development Goals. We advocate social change and development that will inspire the transformation that keeps Africa rising. Join us every week at 6:30 p.m. GMT +1.
We are the wind in the sails of your business. We are your compass. Chart your course towards your targets. Africa Business Radio. Towards a profitable Africa.